So today we're going to focus on the Pāramī of Nekkhama, and Elizabeth just asked for the list.
The list is
most of them.
No, there's Dhamma,
Generosity,
Sila,
moral virtue,
Nekkhama, we're going to do today.
renunciation, and we're going to use some other terminology too, because that word kind of puts people off sometimes.
Yeah. Panya, or wisdom. Virya.
Energy.
Kanti.
Patience, which we did recently.
Sacha.
Truthfulness.
Aditana.
The determination or resolve.
Metta.
Loving kindness.
And Upekkha.
Equanimity. That's the list. We also posted it on the bulletin board in the kitchen, in case anybody wants to kind of refresh on that. And yeah, it's a powerful collection of qualities that really can be used as a basis for our development on the path. And I know there are many different ways of slicing the path, so you can come to the path from many different directions. And the Buddha was so incredible in the way he gave such a variety of approaches and ways of practice, and sometimes it can be confusing. When do I know what to do when? But I think as we develop, we start to recognize that how we approach the Dhamma is a matter of what our karma is and what our particular makeup is. And when we find something that actually brings us to greater peace and purity of mind, then that's the thing we should use. And you kind of as the Dhamma is a huge tapestry. If you kind of pull on one thread, you eventually get all of it. It all comes to us. So today we're going to talk about renunciation or Nekkhama. And I've been seeing renunciation as having these three facets that I want to talk about. And it's not something that is framed that way in the suttas, but as we've been talking about various aspects of Nekkhama, of renunciation, that's what I see, these kind of three facets or three ways of viewing it. And the first one is through the lens of right intention, of being looking at kind of those two kinds of thought that the Buddha talked about in the suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya, where when we have thoughts of sensual desire, so like I want something, I'm really focused on some sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, or even thought that I'm really caught up in, that the opposite of that can lead us to do all kinds of things that are unskillful. And the opposite of that is letting go of that craving, that desire. And that's Nekkhama, that's renunciation. And the second part of right intention is kindness, or goodwill, or non-ill will, where wrong intention is ill will. And the third one is the wrong intention part is cruelty or harming, and the right way of thinking, of holding ourselves, of approaching things is non-harming, harmlessness. Or as Ajahn Brahm, he uses the word gentleness, which really strikes my heart. So this way of seeing renunciation in that context of kindness, gentleness, and letting go. So I'm going to talk more about that this morning. And I have a little sutta that I want to share about that. And then later I want to talk about the renunciation of materialism, not materialism in terms of an approach to life, but the material world, and how we work with letting go of things, letting go of what there is in the world around us that we cling to and depend upon. And there's a little sutta that's going to go along with that. And the third facet I'm thinking of is a way of looking at letting go or practicing renunciation with regard to our mental qualities, our habits, our long-standing kind of ways of thinking and clinging and doing things that may not be helpful to our development, and how to work with that. And so there's a little sutta that's going to come out later. So I think, well, I'm going to talk about this first facet this morning, and then at 1 o'clock talk about the second one, and then at 3 o'clock talk about the third one, and then we can have some comments and questions along the way, and an opportunity to practice meditation in between, and maybe let that all sink in and settle as we go into stillness as much as we can. So I'm going to share the screen as I show you the first sutta. Go over here to Sutta Central, and I want to show you all three of these suttas. All three of these suttas are from the Itivuttaka, and I'm going to show you how to get there, first of all. So first of all, we select from the basket of discourses in Sutta Central. So there's three major parts here: the discourses, the monastic law, and the systematic treatises, or the Abhidhamma. Those are the three components of the canon, the Pali canon. So the discourses, and then we have the major collections of discourses: long, middle, linked, numbered, and we're going to the minor one, the minor collection, the Khuddaka. And then when you get to inside any of these collections, there's the collection itself at the top, and then there's the various other things. They've included here various Dhammapada texts and also Chinese texts. And we want the minor collection, the one that's translated from Pali. And inside here, there are a bunch of books: the Khuddaka, the Dhammapada, the Udana is the heartfelt sayings, but the one we're interested in here is the Itivuttaka. And here, Bhante Sujato is calling it "So It Was Said." Okay, so as you can see here, it says, the reason I want to tell you about this collection is because there's something unusual and special about it. It was actually teachings that were learned by this laywoman named Kujuttara. And she was, according to the Pali canon, she was the servant or maid to a queen, the queen Samavati, who was probably the chief queen to King Udana in Magadha. And Kujuttara, some places I've read that she was a slave, and she was a servant to the queen. And we do see in the suttas references to the queen and her all of her attendants, or maybe it was the entire harem of the king. And you really get the sense from the suttas as well as the commentary that these women were really confined in the palace. And there's a sutta in the Udana that talks about how when the king was away, his whole royal compound burned down and all of these women died in this fire. But the Buddha said that when they died, there were non-returners, once returners, and dream enterers among them. They all were at some level of enlightenment. And the reason this happened is because this slave girl, the queen would give her money to go to buy flowers for the women's area. And she would spend half the money on flowers, and half of it she'd buy things she wanted for herself. So she's cheating, stealing from the queen, really. And she'd come back and there'd be the flowers. And then, but one day while she was out to get flowers, she saw the Buddha and she heard him teach. And she was so enthralled that then the next time she went, she sought it out and she heard the Buddha teach again. And then she realized she couldn't steal from the queen anymore. She had to, to spend all the money on flowers. So she spent all the money on flowers. And then the queen's like, why are there so many flowers? Like she was used to seeing like half the amount, right? And then Kujutara told her what had been happening, that she had been, using the money for herself, but then she saw the Buddha and she heard his teachings and she couldn't do it anymore. Now this queen was very kind. I think slaves could be very severely punished for such a thing, but she didn't punish her at all. She said, teach us what the Buddha's been saying. So Kujutara would be sent out, and every whatever period of time, every week, whatever, she would listen to the Buddha and she would come back with the teaching fully memorized, and she would tell it to the queen and all of the ladies of the court. And that's how they got enlightened. And so, this particular book is those teachings. And so they all start with, so it was said, this is what I heard from the Buddha. And it's, as it says here, it's the survival of these texts was not attributed to the monastic Sangha, but to this laywoman, which is pretty cool, I think. So when we get in here, these texts, so first we'll click on this. So it was said. And then it's organized kind of like the Anguttara Nikaya with 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. And I'm just gonna slip over. Sorry, I've got to move this thing off the screen to one I've already found in the book of 4s, and this is the one I want to look at this morning. This was said by the Buddha, the perfected one. That is what I heard. So this is Kujutara's memorization. Mendicants. These 3 unskillful thoughts are destroyers of sight, vision, and knowledge. They block wisdom. They're on the side of anguish, and they don't lead to extinguishment. So, as you probably know, I rather keep the Pali here, which is they don't lead to nibbana. What 3? Thoughts of sensuality, malice, and cruelty. So here's another different translation for sensual desire, ill will, and harming, or harmfulness, or cruelty. These are the 3 unskillful thoughts that are destroyers of sight, vision, and knowledge. They block wisdom. They're on the side of anguish, and they don't lead to nibbana. These 3 skillful thoughts are creators of sight, vision, and knowledge. So when you think of sight, vision, and knowledge, it's like what the Buddha talked about on, what happened on the night of his enlightenment, to know and see. This is not just intellectual knowledge. This is a direct experience. These are the kinds of thoughts that lead to that direct experience of Dhamma, to really know and see. So of course they grow wisdom. They're on the side of solace, and they lead to nibbana. What 3? Thoughts of renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. These are the three skillful thoughts that are creators of sight, vision, and knowledge. They grow wisdom. They're on the side of solace, and they lead to nibbana. When the Buddha spoke this matter on this, it was said. So there's, for each of these, there's the prose at the beginning, and then there's the verse. Think the three skillful thoughts and get rid of the unskillful, quelling such thoughts and considerations like rain on the dust. With a heart calmed of thought, you'll touch the state of peace right here. This too is a matter that was spoken by the Blessed One. That is what I heard. So I love this verse. Think the three skillful thoughts and get rid of the unskillful, quelling such thoughts and considerations like rain on the dust. With a heart calmed of thought, you'll touch the state of peace right here. I like the simile there, rain on the dust. And then there's an image in my mind. How many times I've seen that? Rain on the dust. We get a tremendous amount of dust in California in the late summer when it's really dry. And when it rains, finally, it just calms everything down. So letting the mind calm down like that, letting the heart calm down like that, with a heart calmed of thought, consider that this is not intellectual. The thoughts come through the mind. It's what we, like that's how we perceive the way thought works. But the heart, this idea of chitta is heart and mind, and that it's really calming our whole kind of agitation of thinking and feeling, emotion, calming down, touching a state of peace right here. So this way of thinking about Nekkhama, I know I've been talking about this, every now and again here lately. This way of thinking of letting go, and those three wholesome thoughts of kindness, gentleness, and letting go. And so it's like setting the whole. It's the intention, right? And setting the whole context of your mental activity, the whole context of how you approach whatever conditions and situations we find ourselves in. And when we find ourselves in moments when we're not thinking this way, when this isn't the basis of our mental states, when what's there is some desire, I want something to be different, I want this person to act differently. Maybe it's our teenager, maybe it's our partner, maybe it's our boss, who cares, whatever it is, we want it to be different than it is. And it's not saying that, the people around us or we ourselves are always skillful. We know that's not the case. So there's this, we may be perfectly justified in wanting something to be different because it feels like this is not right and it should be changed. There's no really reason for this to be so complicated or so negative or whatever. But this is the nature of samsara. This is how we get caught up in what's blocking wisdom and peace, blocking sight and knowledge. And so when we find our own mind in this kind of state of something that's not kindness, gentleness, and letting go, then we have this opportunity to shift. What is it like if I identify the same issue, but I do it with this intention, it really changes the whole feeling of it. It changes the way we say something to someone else about it. It changes the way the mind works with it until it can set it down. And we can put it down much more quickly and easily. Excuse me. So this is a simple, you might say, but challenging approach to everything that leads to Nibbana. Instead of, for most of us, what our habits are of continuing with some kind of level of dissatisfaction, impatience, restlessness, desire, something that brings more agitation, less insight. And so this, to notice this in the moment. Notice this in the moment as we're reflecting on something, or we feel triggered by something, or we're hearing something, seeing something, whatever that doesn't feel right, and we have some kind of reaction to it, or some memory that we have. If it's not in the space of kindness, gentleness, and letting go, we're not in the space of Nekkhama, in this, in this idea of intention. When I think about this, like when the Buddha's talking about right intention, it's like filling our whole screen of awareness with this attitude, right attitude, right? It's not just like, some kind of discrete straight line of intention, like my intention to go to the library tomorrow or whatever. It's not like that. It's intention that's encompassing everything, no matter what the particular actions or plans or anything. It's like this kind of idea of intention sets the tone, sets the color, sets the whole mental approach. It's the ground of existence. If we make it the ground of our mental existence, then it leads to Nibbana, wisdom, solace, Nibbana. So that's part one. Any questions or comments? Or maybe you just want to go do it.
I think I have a question.
Okay.
So when something unskillful comes up and you recognize it, and it's not so much pushing it away. I guess the tricky part for me is how to just let it be without encouraging it, without squashing it, and allowing it to pass.
Yeah, so thank you, because what I've been doing myself, and I think I want to make a distinction here, like exactly what you said. We don't want to squash it or hide it, or like all of this kind of thing. But instead of kind of trying to push it out of my mind or act like it's not happening or any of that, bringing in the felt sense of kindness, gentleness, and letting go, but holding that unskillful whatever it is there, as well, it changes the whole sense of it, the perception of that experience. It changes the whole kind of state around it. So it's like, then you can work with it. If there's really kindness and gentleness there, and the letting go means you're not kind of fixed upon it and attached to it, but you see it there, and you can really get a sense of how to accept it first, like you say, but you're not caught up in it anymore. So this is something we've talked about a lot. It's like how to be with your experience instead of in that experience, how to be with the trauma, with the unskillful interior, exterior, my own or someone else's actions, with the complete chaos and mess in the world and all of its parts, all of its many situations. It's like how to be with that without being absorbed into it, caught up into it, carried along by it, encouraged to be unskillful through it. And so I feel like this is another way to just look at how to do that. Instead of just not trying to push it away or act like it's not happening or blame someone else or something else. If you come to it with kindness, gentleness, and letting go, the blame stops. You still look at causes and conditions, and you can do it with equanimity. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Holly?
Well, this seems like a really nice package of 3 things. And I was asking myself, where would it apply to my life lately? And it really kind of passes the test. So what I see it is on the letting go. It's Ajahn Sumedho's, it's like this. My husband used to be mentally sharp and healthy, and now he's not. And each day it's like he's a teenager. I'm not quite sure how much ability there's going to be. And so the letting go is of Jean being healthy cognitively and physically is a day-to-day exercise for me. And then the harmlessness I took as to not harm is to not fringe on his way right now. There may be some nonsensicalness or reluctance to do something because it's too complicated, things like that. So they're not. It's hard to know when to infringe on his way.
Yeah.
And then I need to be directive sometimes. And sometimes I get frustrated, and that directivity I know comes on too strong. So that's a practice for me. And letting go when his actions really are okay. Does it really matter if I redirect, correct, clarify, or is it just fine for him to do what he's doing? So these are all things I'm learning. Other women, other people have learned them. And then the loving kindness and gentleness is to gentleness to Jean and to me in body, speech, and mind. And it has to do with, or I wrote body, speech, and chitta. So my intentions with Jean and friends, in my intentions with Jean and friends, and for me in my own heart and fears and wants, to be gentle. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. What you're experiencing is such a powerful practice ground. And you can easily see all the habitual energy from, like being with him in his way that he's always been, like your partners, and you're, like this, now it's changed. And so there's the letting go of wanting it to be the way it was before, of course. And there's also everything you're describing is such a powerful practice ground. But it really helps us to look at things afresh. we're not just going along in our old patterns and the way this we interact with the people that we're close to. Now it has to be reformed. And you're so right in seeing the nuances of that. Like, when is it okay for me to just let it go? And even though, it's not what he would have done in the past, and it's not the preferred way you'd like it to be, but it's not hurting anything. This is something to notice about our children as we're raising them. There's the things that we can point out that might help them to do better in life. But there's a lot of things that the important things are the things where we can see that their activity or their action, the way they're going is going to lead to long-term harm for themselves or others. That's when we really want to step in, when we have a responsibility to step in. But otherwise, it's a phase. And as you've seen, Gene's condition, his state is changing a lot. Like, it's fluctuating, and you don't know where it's going to go. And that's another thing that's really hard to handle, all the uncertainty of life, because we just don't know what's going to happen next. None of us, and so it's like, this is such an important practice ground, because it brings the reality of our situation as human beings in this world into sharp focus.
Yeah, it's not an intellectual practice anymore.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And this happens whenever there are big changes, when a parent starts to change cognitively, or a partner decides to leave us, or our children are growing up, and there's just a million opportunities in our lifetime. And what a lot of human beings do is just cope. And we want to go beyond coping, because we can use all of these things to really develop the heart and to awaken. And as that process matures in us, we become a beautiful resource for others, as well as gain so much more peace for ourselves. So thank you, Holly, for sharing this with us. So Mariah next, and then Deborah. You're muted, Mariah.
So, so often you introduced just what I was thinking with my comments, in terms of, you talked about children again, and it's a phase, and that we must still accept that, as certainly as mothers, our responsibility, if our child's actions are leading to the long-term detriment of themselves and others. I was looking at renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. I have to learn to direct those things towards myself, because I have these difficult emotions, especially now that I must follow through and litigate against Lance so that he pursues the insurance. And for me, that it's the use of the why, the two things that Longpo Mun said to Ajahn Chah regarding how could he possibly follow the 227 precepts. Wise shame for past actions, wise, right? It's so hard as a Judeo-Christian Islam part of that inculcated in those things. It's so different from guilt.
Yeah.
And it's easy to just go, okay, memory's a liar. But I have to look back honestly at all of those good qualities that I know are there. Right? I raised him, and it's not his actions. So I have to look back, because I do feel so sad of all the mistakes, right? And I see some consequences here. But the why, to be harmless to myself, which is essential if I'm going to follow through and be strong for all the kids.
Yeah.
I have to look at those things and just almost like we talk and we try to do it when I've got a state of samadhi also, just reflect,
Yeah.
not with a thinking mind, but how did I feel with the little boy who tamed wild wood rats? How did I feel when he sewed his sister a princess dress? When he wanted to pay for my, on and on and on, right?
Mhm.
And look at that as that, those qualities can still be there, and I simply have to stick to precepts with what he's doing is wrong or a lie or whatever. It's not who he is. He's greedy. He always was, and also very generous. But I have to not go back to the feeling state of guilt, of just how could I have been so, that's so unskillful, and try to move towards the goodwill toward myself that I so easily want to just spread to others and do nice, right? That makes me feel good. The generosity allays the pain. When you just give to people, they light up and they feel happy, you feel happy. But at this stage, I think for these things, I have to just try to reside in a place where I'm not beating myself up,
Yeah.
and I can use those as they play out, right, in court and discovery and so on, especially so the neutrality can be seen by the siblings, right? That I have some measure of equanimity, not my strength, right?
Well,
So,
this is so important, Mariah, and I really appreciate you bringing it up because, especially, I'm told I've only lived really in this Western culture here and in England, but I'm told that in Western culture we have a greater measure of guilt and beating ourselves up than you
yeah,
find in other places, and you know it's so important to see whatever our culture is, whatever our um, enculturation is, whatever our conditioning is, for where ill will, cruelty, greed is encouraged, we need to um, overcome it. And for so many people, that is in self aggression and beating ourselves up. And we're so used to it, we don't even notice it. You know, we're just, you know, like blaming ourselves, putting ourselves down, chastising ourselves internally, oftentimes quite harshly or rudely. And it's so important to, you know, some people tell me that daily they need to remind themselves of their own goodness. Daily they need to turn a light of loving kindness onto their own heart. And this is something I would really recommend. The Buddha didn't come from the Western culture, but still in the suttas, it's, you know, this loving kindness to all as to myself, compassion to all as to myself. That as means in the same measure, in the same way, and the encouragement, the joy in other people's successes, the joy in seeing goodness around us, everywhere around us, also as to ourselves, having the joy for the goodness in ourselves. And so this is something to really cultivate, how these three qualities, these three kind of infused into the environment of our mind, of our life, of our world, this letting go, this gentleness and kindness that has to come to ourselves. When we see that we're kind of stingy with giving that to ourselves, somehow the feeling I was raised with, and probably you were too, Mariah, and maybe everyone else listening, I don't know, is that if I beat myself up, I'll be better.
right.
I have to reprimand myself
I,
in order
I
to
used
go the
to
straight
say
way.
to student friends, the hair shirt thing just doesn't work. It's
Yeah,
just
it
so
doesn't work.
different. Look, there are several. I've been told, it's been to many times, and to and all mostly through Liam, who's sort of part of the Virtuous Bro Network. Oh, I shouldn't be so disrespectful, but it just is it's so, I can't even express it. So endearing to me how the monks of Abhayagiri saved his life. They are still men, and they hang out like men, and they act like men, and they're so jovial with each other, and they from me under their wing and taught him so many things. And I've always been a space alien anyway. That's the result of trauma. So I look at it and I think, wow, this is the best place to send all of your Oakland boys who think 420 is a gift and that girls are all on and on. But back to what you said about loving kindness, I need to add it. I feel that it's important to add the trauma component. When one has big T, little t, huge
Yes.
and continuous little trauma. One, it's a brain on trauma, and it seeks out just like this. You're used to this and you go find it. But if you can, every single difficult thought, tensing of the body, anxious thought, if you can pause, and I'm the poster child of anxiety, right? But if I can breathe, put my feet on the ground for 2 or 3 seconds and feel, this is all words, so I don't have the best ones. You do, and Ajahn Suchito do. So with your words, if people offer this, breathe, listen, and truly feel like a mommy is petting you. It's okay. Yes, you seriously screwed up, and so does everybody else. And the ruse is, if you don't do that, who Luang Prabhupada said was full of metta, if I don't do that, it's actually only metta to a certain depth. There is a point when I don't really have it. Not really, right? Not after a fire, and so on. But it's very possible. Sure, I sound escalated, but it's very possible for just a few seconds to take that mind state of metta and feel like you're a little infant being enveloped. And that's actually kind of the only way to stay sturdy in the face of serious teenager grown up to 35 that wants to take your house from you and make you homeless, right? He's still not a monster. So neither was Angulimala, right? So, but without turning it to oneself, I would argue many times a day, there's so much stress out there in conventional reality. People have stop signs, for example. That it's all
So I want to make sure we condense this down to something we can hold on to, and to recognize that it's crucial that we apply these 3 everywhere, that we really pay attention to when it's lacking towards ourselves, and we make sure it comes in. And it does come in deeply into the heart, and we continue to do that. And the reference to trauma is so important. And the body holds on to it way after you think you've resolved it mentally. And it's so much the case, like the body, we feel the trauma through the body, and we feel awakening through the body. And it's so important that we stay connected with the body, and we care for that whole complex of body and mind. So thank you, Mariah.
Thank you.
Deborah? You're muted, my dear. Can you?
Okay.
There you go.
I did it. I have such a hard time with all these things on here. I don't know why. Someone just said, raise your hand. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. Then I finally figured it. I know I did do it. And I'm still holding my hand up. It's really hit me. What we're talking about. I have a son. He's estranged from me.
Oh, yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
He's in his 30s. I didn't do anything. I have no idea what I did. He just decided not to bother with me anymore. I was a single mom. Anyways, the hardest part of it all is I can't give metta to myself. You know, I can't show loving kindness to me because I feel like I did something wrong. You know, even if I didn't, you know, it was his choice to stay away from me. He said terrible things to stay away from me. He blocked me from everywhere. If I try to get in touch with him, he talks horrible to me. So I try to stay away from talking now. And if I do write things to him, he doesn't answer anyways. But the hardest part of all of this is that he doesn't speak to me, of course. I don't even know if he has children, nothing. I can't give myself, I could be nice to others and work with others so well, and I could give love and kindness and metta to others, but I can't do it to myself. I can't give it to me.
Yeah.
And I'm working on it. I work on it.
But the point here, Deborah, is that I hear that it doesn't, it's not really working to just try to give yourself metta, because what needs to happen first is letting go of that attachment to your son. And you can say, well, how in the world do you do that?
I know.
But this whole day, we're going to come across later the whole idea of letting go of attachments to everything.
Yes.
So there needs to be an infusion of wisdom that's going to make it possible to have that infusion of metta. And the infusion of wisdom goes along the lines of, you know, you decide to have a child, or maybe you didn't decide, it just happened.
No, I did.
And then you have a child, and then, you know, you have no idea where this child has come from. I mean, yeah, there's the male and the female contribution to the body. That's where the body gets formed. But the Buddha said there's a third component that's required, and that's a living being that already exists.
Yes.
This living being has its own karma. It has
And I
its
don't know
own.
him. You know, I don't know him. He's not mine. You know,
Exactly.
You know, he's not mine. But I don't know.
So this living being has its own karma, and it comes together with this fertilized egg, and this is what you give birth to. But it's just passing through you, and we have no idea where it's come from, and we have no idea where it's going. And this is something that the enlightened bhikkhunis talk about in their poetry, because so many of them lost children. You know, the infant mortality and the sudden death of anyone before modern medicine came along and started keeping us alive more. You know, it's like so many of them came to become nuns after losing children.
I can understand.
And they would be mourning that loss. And then the enlightened nun says, but that child came from somewhere, and it's going somewhere, and we don't know what its story is all the way along. She said, if we knew where this being has come from, and we knew where they were going, we wouldn't mourn, we wouldn't cry, there wouldn't be any sorrow, because you're just this vehicle now that this person comes through. So this is the kind of wisdom infusion that there needs to be to really like broaden the context, put it into perspective. If we keep thinking thoughts like, my son doesn't want to have anything to do with me, what did I possibly do to create this? We keep thinking like that, it's just going to take us down, down, down.
Oh yeah, he lets me know. He let me know. He just says horrible things to me, and I'm like, who is this person? Like, I don't know who he. Like, I don't know who you are.
And I know that you're not like sometimes the reaction would be to push such a person away, you know, like, I don't want anything to do with you either, you know, like you're
like that though. I'm like, please, just explain, talk to me, like, help me understand this, you know. And there's
I'm gonna say, like, renunciation, the way it needs to manifest for you at this point is to really let that go. To let go of the wish to talk to him, to let go of the wish to have contact, to let go of the sense of me and mine,
Yes.
to put his whole existence in this larger context. You know, and some people might think, well, this is starting to sound like a therapy session. No, this is Dhamma. This is Dhamma. This is
Yeah.
like, how do we apply the Dhamma to this?
Exactly.
Because we have to live according to Dhamma if we want freedom. Regardless of the situation, all we can do, well, what we're doing here is
Yes.
applying the Dhamma. And the Dhamma is, yeah, causes and conditions brought this situation to being. And now we have a certain amount of choice of how to be present with that.
Yes.
So renunciation, whenever thoughts come into your mind about him, instead of like any kind of negativity, it needs to be, you know, I wish him well. I wish him well on his way. May the suffering end for him.
Yeah.
But hands off. It's
Yeah.
not your job anymore.
No.
It's not your job. He's grown up.
Mm.
He's making his own choices. He's got his own life. Who cares if he has kids or not?
I know, you're right. I know.
Why anymore? Why would we care any more about that than some neighbor down the street having kids or somebody on the other side of the world having kids? Just think of it like that.
That's good. Thank you.
You
You're
know?
right. You're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Thank you, because it makes it, and it makes you understand, like it, and like I always say, he's not mine. I gotta keep on saying, he's not mine. He's not mine. Don't beat yourself up. You know, give yourself metta. Give yourself love and kindness, because you deserve that. Everyone deserves that. I can give it to everybody, but not myself, because of this reason. But I am working on it, so that's a good thing. But you're right. Think about the gut personality. I don't really care about them. It's right. I mean, I care, but
Yeah.
right.
What we're developing into is beings that can love everyone the same. Everyone. Care about every 30-something person who's so angry and feeling so miserable,
Yes.
and wish them well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thanks for everyone showing me how to raise my hand. Thank you so
Yay!
much. Thank you so much. I didn't know how to do it.
You got it.
I'll lower it now. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this is, yes, Mahesh?
So when we renunciate, if let's say
When we
do renunciation,
do renunciation,
if we let's say you're having some difficulty with some coworker, and then passing metta or goodwill to them will help us think about their problems and our problems, and we can come to a good solution. But that also can make us, there are other parties, there can be other parties involved, there is company, or there are other people who can get impacted if we go soft on them, or if we don't really express the need, or right. So the goodwill or metta is, you need to pass to the company or the other people involved, and this person is like, we might tend to forget that. And so how do we avoid in these situations where what we are enunciating is not just our needs or wish to get something, but there is also some other good or other people involved?
So I think I'm going to repeat it, because I think maybe you could you hear it online? You could.
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to repeat it, and maybe that'll clarify that I understood. This is an important question because it involves metta. It feels like if you give metta in a situation, and you're kind of, the words were going soft with someone at work, but it also affects the rest of the company, it affects other people, and it feels like a dichotomy. Either I have metta and I go soft, or I go hard and make sure that this happens, or this person steps up, or whatever, And I think that we have to start to see how metta and wisdom always have to work together. So the wisdom helps us to say what's needed, and it doesn't have a negative ramification for the other parties involved, because it's actually bringing clarity to what actually needs to be done. Still delivering that with kindness. When we have this idea that if I deliver it with anger, it's going to have more effectiveness. And you might cause people to pay attention more in the beginning, but there's always a seed of revenge that comes to being in there, comes into existence. So the thing is, metta isn't just about being soft. And it's about having wisdom. It's about being wise. So you want to make sure that the issues are clear and the requirements are clear and the kindness is there. And then you do treat everybody that way, everybody. And so we have to give it thought. We have to give it thought, like what is really the right outcome for everyone here? What's going to help the whole thing go forward in a good way? The company, the other people, the person you're involved with, and you.
So I can hold the standards a little bit higher or lower, and the other person, this can make the other person uncomfortable, but it can be good for others. Let's assume there is no anger, or let's say we took care of the anger or force part, but then the standards can be changed based on what the other person is comfortable or what is actually good for the company or others.
Right. So then with clarity, with wisdom, with calm, you can have the standards be stricter or the standards be looser. And maybe the looser standard is more comfortable for this person, but the stricter standard is going to help the company and help other people. And maybe it'll help the person themselves. So that's how you have to present it. Like, I think we should go with a stricter standard here. That's going to make us all better. And you appeal to that part of them, encouraging them to step up. But this is where Ajahn Ganha would say wisdom solves the problem. So it's with wisdom that you're in the situation, you can see all the pieces. The wisdom has to decide to know whether it's a looser standard or a stricter standard that's actually going to be beneficial in the long term. And whether or not having the stricter standard, maybe it's not going to make all that much difference in the long term. You just have to feel that out. When we get ourselves out of the way, then we're able to see it more clearly. And wisdom can solve the problem. But when he says that to people, wisdom solves the problem. He's not going into every nuance of it because you can't really. Anyway, it's something you have to learn to do.